Hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
So thanks a lot for joining us all. Web3 Memo is a quarterly podcast tackling different topics of Web3. My friend Vince is also one of the moderators. He's a gaming guru and currently the founder of Nifty Craft, a crafting engine for Web3 gaming assets. Today, we'll be mainly discussing the Web3 opportunity in emerging markets and more specifically Africa. Chris is the founder and CEO of Fonbnk. Thank you, Chris, for joining us.
hey, welcome, Jad. Vince, pleasure to be on here with you today.
Same here. Thank you. So you're a serial entrepreneur, had three successful exits previously in the Web2 world, and you have like rich expertise in the fintech space. You initially seed-funded Fonbnk. Can you tell us a bit more about the company itself, what you do, how you started, and why you were excited about launching it?
Sure. So as you indicated, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'll add that I have a background in wireless and wireless networking, even hold a patent that's owned by Qualcomm now. And along the way, I also did payments too. And I fell into this rabbit hole a few years ago, actually, over seven at this point, into cryptocurrency, specifically Ethereum, because I saw it as a future of fintech and wanted to reimagine the various tech stacks that I built, both in wireless actually, and in payments on a public blockchain. Most people don't realize this, but a lot of the billing BSS infrastructure for mobile carriers is actually very similar to the payment infrastructure, but in many cases it's many years old and is not as robust and modern. But Fonbnk was actually the catalyst for which was really a bet with my brother-in-law who came back from Kenya a few years ago, and he had this Safaricom SIM that he'd gotten while he was on vacation, and he was telling me about how people could, they used M-Pesa, the mobile money service, everywhere. He, paid for his bar tab, and that he could even use airtime, transfer airtime P2P, either whether he was running low and one of his buddies wanted to give it, or that's how he bought it in a shop. They'd just transfer it to him, and he'd give them cash. Or you could even still use it as a type of payment that people would gladly take airtime if you didn't have cash or even M-Pesa on you. And so he was telling me all this, and we're playing around with the app. I was excited to see. I'd actually never seen the M-Pesa app in person. And as a fintech geek, I was really excited about that. And long story short, bet me that I couldn't resell the value that was remaining on his phone after we plugged it in. We saw that there was like $10 left, but he bet me that I couldn't resell that back to someone on the ground in Kenya. And I didn't want to lose a bet to my brother-in-law, so devised this hack where I took out some ads on Facebook targeting people on the ground in Kenya that liked M-Pesa and Safaricom, and let it run a few days, and actually had actually forgotten about it. Was surprised that a couple people responded, so I invited them into a WhatsApp group, and after a quick negotiation, used his M-Pesa account and the Safaricom SIM to sell and trade the airtime. And that was sort of the genesis of Fonbnk and what it is today, which I would describe sort of our core benefit is we provide an on-ramp to Web3 targeting mobile-first, cash-based economies using this prepaid airtime as a medium of exchange.
Great, okay, very exciting. As we know, like we especially today and over the past few days, crypto prices are really getting destroyed. There are question marks around the space itself. I think one of the main issues is utility, more or less, it's still being developed. How do you see its utility in your markets, especially emerging markets, and how is Fonbnk addressing its utility?
Well, so this is where I go back to we're an on-ramp, right? moving money around across emerging markets, you know, everywhere from Middle East to down to Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia. It's very expensive, and it's required these cross pairs. But what's crazy is that even in the worst economic times, we could still have a call like this, right? And sort of one of the big epiphanies I had about Fonbnk is you have the telephony rails, whether it was copper rails or now fiber, these global treaties that allow us to have these types of conversations. We're transferring data back and forth. How come we can't transfer value back and forth? And in the same way, I was able to get liquidity for my stranded airtime asset on the other side of the world using this public global infrastructure or shared infrastructure. We should be able to do that with money. And so I think first and foremost, in this new digital economy, the highest and best utility is value transfer. And what we're seeing is that there's a lot of artificial sort of limitations on that, driven by the banking cabal. But for most people, and in many respects, Fonbnk's not designed to buy a house or a car or something like that. It's for micro transactions, for digital goods and services, and so I see that as our primary utility, is just value transfer. And then with that, that type of core infrastructure, you can build all types of applications on that, whether it's industry specific, application specific, et cetera.
Great. In terms of your journey, so you told us a bit about your idea generation and when you kind of decided to launch the business. About more from an entrepreneurial journey, building your first team, then building your MVP, then starting to crack demand, and which you successfully did. You reached very, very interesting volume recently. Can you give us more colors around that?
Yeah. So, in many respects, Fonbnk is the culmination of those entrepreneurial, and I'd even almost describe it as academic, sort of professional experiences, where I like to think maybe it's a masterclass in minimum viable product. But when we first started, as I mentioned, it was this bet with my brother-in-law, and I devised this test, right? That was the first gate. And I think for many entrepreneurs, where many fail or fail to recognize rather, is sort of the understanding of this product market fit and what that means. And that could actually evolve, right? You want more money, there's other validation points that need to be addressed. Where ultimately then it's okay, I'm a real business because I have revenues minus expenses equals profits, and we're growing at some, faster than normal rate. But before you get there, right, that's obvious. There's a lot of not so obvious steps that one should take, and that's where the MVP comes into play, or the test design, so to speak, of that. And and I'd even say for Fonbnk, our product and what you see today has changed so many times, whether behind the scenes or explicitly from the product design. And what I mean by that is after I did the test or the bet with my brother-in-law, I quickly just kept that WhatsApp group and started inviting more people to it, and was wanted to get people that traded airtime back and forth. So I created this group of I think you're limited to 150 people on WhatsApp. So we had 150 people on WhatsApp that were trading prepaid airtime, and this was sort of just a message board. And then I got a deal with a global airtime gateway company, and I just set up a little terminal where I could be a seller of airtime. And so I was like, all right, well, what if I just sold it at a discount? So it was cheaper than what they could buy, and they could make money. Would they buy from me? And they did, right? But it was hard to convert M-Pesa that is denominated in Kenyan shillings back in the dollar. So we then created this mechanism where we created this sort of in-app token that was theoretically backed by dollars that could then be redeemed and so forth into this resale process. And we did that. To now, and from there, what we did, we actually became one of the as our wholesaler told us, we were the top new reseller in the country of Nigeria for 2019. Selling discount airtime.
Wow.
Not necessarily intended for what their business model was, but we were the top on their books for that market at that time of the year. And that's what we used for our pre-seed to fund our, as sort of the traction points for our pre-seed round. And then we, had this epiphany where a lot of these folks were taking these tokenized assets that we had and then reselling that directly for airtime. And I was like, whoa, well, we could automate that in our app where we could essentially create a swap, right? Because we realized that there's this imbalance between, these people that could have that could buy the tokens, and then people that wanted to trade the tokens, for airtime, right? Or trade airtime for these tokens. And so we did that, and that's what grew into our protocol that we've developed, where someone now can convert a unit of prepaid mobile access into cryptocurrency using our sort of distributed application or DEX. And again, the primary benefit of this being, if I'm a consumer in Nigeria or Kenya or Argentina or Philippines or Lebanon, I can take my local currency, go to my airtime shop where I might ordinarily top up my phone, and then use that credit, which is already digitized, and then convert that into some type of digital asset that I could then use either for a store of value, payment. We have relationships with Visa, MasterCard, even Western Union. They're an investor in us. So that's sort of a future vision is, with that, and to be an on-ramp. So if you're in gaming, that's an area that we want to go after. If you're an e-commerce company, that's an area that we can support. If you're any type of distributed or application, wallet, protocol, we can provide a dollar-denominated on-ramp into your ecosystem from anywhere in the world, especially in emerging markets where there are high money movement or treasury costs.
While building your MVP, any big assumption you made that weren't did it into your real case, or it went smooth because you were kind of granular in your approach step by step?
I'd say it's always a very iterative process, right? I'm a bit jaded in that, actually, I'm an optimist, right? I expect every single test that I do will be like, oh, this is going to be the $1 billion one, and we're going to have super normal growth when we do this, and this will just validate everything. But I've just learned to expect that that's probably not, going to be the case, and I've tampered my expectations accordingly. But to realize that they're all very, very incremental, many will fail, and you should take a very scientific process, and so I actually spend a lot of time, I actually write out test plans, right? And, as a developer, you do this for your product. Well, as a business analyst and sort of product manager, you kind of have to do that as well for understanding sort of like what is the customer journey, what are they expecting, what do you think the behaviors will be, you know, let me test these different scenarios, you know, and I think that's part of our DNA, my DNA, just experientially, you know, because I do think, you know, this is my belief as an entrepreneur, as smart people, you know, where many entrepreneurs fail, it's not that they don't have a good idea, but they just don't have enough time based on the capital that they have. And so where I think many fail is that they think, okay, I have this one idea, I'm just going to go put everything on it, right? That's the equivalent of like going to a casino and say, I'm going to bet everything on black, right? Well, it works, or probably more along the lines, more likely, I'm going to bet everything on black 47, right? And well, you know, high probability that's going to fail, right? And so I go in with this sort of approach where I might I watch the wheel go around a couple times, and I see that it might favor black when X is occurring. So that's what I do. And I might, you know, see what was the last spin on the roulette wheel, right? And then, you know, if it was black, then I'll put it on red, because the probability is that it's going to probably revert back to the other color in the next spin. So these are the types of things scientifically and mathematically product business owners need to sort of entrepreneurs need to think about when going to market with their product. And there is a difference. You know, you read the MVP literature, you know, and I tend to agree with this. There's the product launch and then the marketing launch. The marketing launch could be years after the actual product launch. Like, oh, we just did a Series D financing for $100 million, and now we're going to do advertising, you know, and people are going to know about us that didn't necessarily already know about us, you know, versus, hey, we've incrementalized along the way, and now we're a nice, $100 million a year revenue company that now wants to get to that next level, right? So it's kind of like, in many respects, having the Super Bowl ad is the pinnacle of your business, but you probably want to do some other sort of much lower cost go-to-market user acquisition strategies that are sustainable.
On that note, Chris, on the idea of your scientific approach to MVP, would you consider, I mean, in my mind, I thought that the WhatsApp group and the requests for airtime on that group was actually the MVP. Wouldn't you say that? Because that, in my mind, it did provide us customer validation, and isn't that the purpose of an MVP? Or how do you think
it is? But I also think you got to think about who your investors are or who your stakeholders are. You have to get to buy in. I use that MVP to my first investor is like my wife. I was selling airtime, and getting WhatsApp messages at 2:00 in the morning, and she's like, what the hell is going on here? I'm like, this is Muhammad in Nigeria. I'm selling airtime, honey. She's like, cut that crap out, But I was like, the business is going, there's such strong interest in this that it's just continually buzzing, right? But you take that sort of body of evidence, and I went to, I found my business partner with that. Right. Yeah. And I was like, all right, well, how do we productize this experience? And then we came up with sort of another sort of, it's a commercial MVP, right? Like that may be the other nuance in it, like getting people to pay you in the process. And so the next step was, all right, let's productize this, but let's see how we can better monetize these these behaviors. And then we did that, and that sort of led to us being the leading new discount online airtime reseller in Nigeria, right, with our wholesaler. And then we took those learnings and experiences where, our users were doing these sort of air gap sort of workflows to trade our token for airtime, where we're like, oh, well, we should capture that behavior and productize it in a way that we can monetize it and capture more value. So I think there's, it's a sequence, and it builds, and I think if you went to like even many established companies, they have a form of this. At least in the tech space that they do, they might spend $1 million on a test, right? Well, their balance sheets can do that. The average sort of entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have that luxury, or even as a startup, you don't have that luxury either. So I do think, the same way that we don't get ahead of ourselves, from buying, renting a huge office or something like that. Well, from a product rollout, we want to know people are going to use it, and I think like my business partner, he runs engineering for us. I have to make a really strong, convincing case to him before we're going to adjust our product roadmap and development schedule for a new product. And what I would tell the average sort of or the no entrepreneur is average, but what I would tell an entrepreneur is that has an idea, that there's so many low code and no code resources out there, and if you are thoughtful, there are ways in which you can sort of validate your hypothesis, and where you're not betting the house on an early test, right? Literally, you could go to Upwork, and then you could even go to Upwork, right? I even did that with our existing engineering team. I use it because there might be some idea I have that I just don't want to have to go through cycles, and I just want to test it. And I'll design it out and maybe write some of the initial code for it, and then share that with someone. It's like, hey, I need this, and for probably under $1,000, I can get something really quick to show, okay, this is how it is. This is the UI, the workflow, and maybe even like a test application for it, a demo application.
Yeah, basically you're betting a tiny nickel on every single slot of this roulette.
Yeah.
Step by step. So I wonder what's the impetus of those users, or like the customers. So you said early on they were buying airtime using the points you were issuing. And do you see that utility expanding as far as like what they're motivated to buy? Do they now wanna buy money using their airtime, or is there like a use case for cross telco airtime exchange, which is could be facilitated by across operators, like not just within Safaricom, for example.
Yeah.
Or a scope of what are they using the coins or the minutes for?
Sure. So, I mean, the primary use case today is to buy cryptocurrency or other sort of digital money stores, like a virtual, like a limited use or gift card on Visa or MasterCard, right? Because if you're originating in a country like a Nigeria or Lebanon, you still want to watch Netflix or listen to Spotify. Well, one of the challenges with these economies is there's currency controls, and so you're limited in the amount of dollars you can access. And as you know, people use VPNs and the like to access some of this global media. Well, this is how they can pay for it. right? We want to be one of the sources for that. But then there's also things like gaming, right? Like, hey, I want to play my favorite game, and that, markets like sub-Saharan Africa are some of the fastest growing markets for gaming. But their challenge is monetization, right? As is the Middle East, right? But I'm just saying that a lot of the challenge for a lot of the Western publishers is gaming, which creates an opportunity for local incumbents. But but you think about like a lot of your infrastructure partners, they're global, right? Whether it's AWS, GCP, MongoDB, whatever. Like you got to pay them in dollars. I mean, only recently GCP is now accepting cryptocurrency as payment. But that being said, we provide that sort of on ramp into that economy, and we make it easy.
We have a question from Oscar. He was asking if you're planning to add more countries soon, like LATAM, Asia, UK, EU, or for the moment you're gonna be core focused on Africa.
We want to, one of the things I would say is go to the site. We have a way for you to bootstrap liquidity in that market, and we'll even pay you to do it. And so just fill out the form, and we can get you set up for that.
Does that work without? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Chad, please.
No, please. It's okay.
I was wondering if the system works without any buy-in from the telco operator.
So the short answer is yes. We use the USSD short code services, and as our access points into the billing infrastructure that carries. So think about it as like a plaid for the mobile networks.
Got it. That's really cool. I like. So in fact, the way USSD can be called without not from the keyboard of the user. Is there like some sort of like API equivalent or something to call USSD?
Yeah, well, we've created that, right?
Okay, so you kind of like simulate. You basically act as a phone vis-a-vis the network, and you just send the USSD commands.
Yes, that's it exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to go about it. So you can basically connect any telco that uses USSD to top up balance or transfer balance using USSD shortcodes without doing any business development with any of them. Nice. Okay.
Correct.
Interesting.
So yeah, we focus on customers and partners to drive liquidity, both demand and supply side on the marketplace.
That's on the points side, right? On the token.
Yes.
Okay.
If we move from the MVP phase and more at the scaling phase, because you kind of like crack demand and you reach like a certain growth rate, how are you going about your expansion within the communities, and what's your approach on consumer acquisition, consumer onboarding, or education?
So like I said, we've done such a really good job of onboarding our users. We've been approached by various protocols, wallets, dApps, where we provide that as a service for them. And our real customer is our liquidity provider. And we're growing that network of people because we provide a unique value proposition to where we're essentially renting out their micro balance sheets on their phone to trade airtime on our behalf. And then we provide them and we can pay them for that. And so if you have a gaming app and you want to get paid, well, we can enable that for microtransactions and settlement in USDC on whatever, nearly a dozen different rails, and including shortly Bitcoin and other protocols like Celo, CUSD for payment.
But communicating it is also like kind of complicated to your end user or end consumers. So how do you simplify the message, make sure they are kind of engaged?
Well, that's where, like, some of the from a product innovation standpoint, where we see some of the opportunity is in working with these partners and using payment and onboarding as that simple sort of value prop. Like, oh, you want to add funds to your wallet? You can pay with airtime if you're in Nigeria, Kenya, or in a market where you may not have an alternative.
Okay, I see. Regarding the tokenomics of where do you stand on the? I think you're talking, it's called Min, right?
Right.
Yes. Are you planning to list it one day? How do you think about its tokenomics?
Potentially, we want to be careful around that. Essentially, what we're doing is we're building out our community, we're building out our value proposition, we're building out sort of the technical requirements of this, and where we'll see an opportunity, but ultimately where we would see a tradable token. Well, two components, right? One, there's maybe a way to extend on a distributed basis our in-app token for use with our wallet or Oracle, right? To convert a unit of airtime, or a unit of Min token back into airtime as it goes from airtime into Min, right? So we want that to happen anywhere in the world where someone can have access to our wallet or Oracle. And then potentially as a way to drive liquidity in our marketplace, where we have, a supply to demand imbalance. Well, we might provide incentives to drive additional sort of liquidity into the marketplace. Like, think Uber surge pricing, of course.
By the way, speaking of this, how does conversion from airtime to Min work? I guess, like, I remember I was a bit involved with telco, and for a while, you have all these networks that just like sometimes give you promotions for like 1,000 free minutes if you buy their SIM cards and things like that. Is that money? I mean, it's not a stable cost per minute of airtime.
No, it's not. But like, so we work. That's where we work with our liquidity providers, or people. These are people that usually might trade airtime or sell you the airtime in the top-up stores. So they already make a market in it, and so it's just a matter of like organizing them. But they set the price, and it's usually based on sort of what that local currency conversion rate into dollars is, and then plus a spread. So think like a type of currency exchange, but they use prepaid airtime as that sort of local currency equivalent. And then,
so it's not really the like a certain formula or an algorithm or a DeFi protocol. It's more like the collective wisdom of these agents.
Yeah.
Basically, the market, the invisible hand.
Exactly. That's really the oracle, is the consensus, right? It's like, hey, I'm a human being. This is what I can sell it for. But we are actually moving more towards that. And this is where I go back to, like, it's not, come back in a year, that could all be automated, right? In terms of, we have a way now to aggregate that inventory on a distributed basis amongst all our market makers and resell that as if it was a digital wholesaler, right? Like where we originally bought airtime from, except it originates locally.
Okay, yeah, that's on your roadmap, or your?
We built that. We built that now.
That's cool. What else is where is the product going?
So ultimately, I see ourselves as a type of MVNO or virtual carrier, except we're not necessarily competing with the carriers. We want to sort of better utilize their network infrastructure and sort of repackage it for our customers, which are global, and they might have specific type use cases for communications. But ultimately, if you think about it, we're creating this new type of wallet where we aggregate someone's funds, especially for microtransactions. And this is ultimately why a lot of apps offer airtime top up. It's probably a better way to denominate small value accounts, and where with the least amount of friction. So I can now have this, bucket of money that I can use for, to buy things, save, or top up my mobile phone, and I can do this anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's like global, and it's good for roaming, I guess. Would it be good?
Well, yeah, like one of the benefits of being a type of MVNO is that we could create a type of marketplace where we do least cost routing of access, right? We could even do things where you might originate in a high cost area, termination area, and we could allow you to on-ramp into the ecosystem with your high cost credits, sell them, and then ultimately use those to access low cost termination globally. This is what voice over IP services do, like WhatsApp.
Would that cost me a negative price if I did that, or just a discount if I were a user?
Well, we would, the goal is we could pay you to do that.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. There's
exactly.
There's
That's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
Imagine, in my ideal product innovation is, imagine every call you made, you got paid for.
Yeah. Interesting, but somebody's paying for that. It's not like the high cost origination countries. So somebody's somehow. So
ultimately, it's not that you wouldn't pay for it, but you wouldn't be paying. You essentially arbitrage the cost of your local market with some other termination market.
Yeah.
It's like getting a discount with a rebate or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And currently, the product is usable as an app on mobile phones.
That's correct.
Which geos is it available in?
So it's broadly available across sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria is our biggest market. Kenya, South Africa, Ghana, Uganda. But we're opening up, we have some test pools in Jamaica, Philippines. We're looking at Mexico, Colombia, Argentina. I'd like to do more in the Middle East. So if there's anybody that wants to set up liquidity there, just reach out to me, or go on the site, and we have a section that allows you to fill out a form and say, hey, I don't see my country represented. I'd like to be a bootstrap liquidity on the marketplace. And
what's the volume required, you think, to have a good?
Small, like $10.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's a lot of prepaid credit there's
about $2 trillion in annual turnover in this globally, right? And it over indexes and across emerging markets.
Okay, what's the total? Like both prepaid and postpaid.
Oh, you're talking of $4 or $5 trillion.
Okay, so it's about half. Yeah, half of.
But in terms of, I mean, a lot of that is like, you think about a place like the U.S. I pay $100 a month. The average postpaid, the average prepaid is like $50 a year, $50 to $100 a year. So in terms of people, it's prepaid.
Bigger. Yeah, that's why it's like 90% of people on mobile use prepaid. If to consider China, even, and India.
Oh yeah,
totally. Yeah. So are you thinking? So today I download. I'm in Uganda. I download the app and I can buy airtime with the local MNO using it, or I can turn my own minutes to tokens. Right? Is there something else I can do
Yeah, and then you
today?
could buy a virtual gift card. You could buy an NFT on
Right.
OpenSea. You can, buy Bitcoin.
Right.
You know,
So
I
it
mean,
seems to me like the product is kind of complete because once it's a token, as you mentioned, I can do whatever I want with it.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
necessarily with the app, outside of it,
yeah,
like wherever
correct.
it has utility, or it can be exchanged. What's like, what's next for the like? How's the product team looking now at what's next? Is it just a global expansion, trying to scale it up, secure it more, or there's like additional features that are like key to solving some pain points that you're already seeing?
Um, we are, to be honest, the
Sounds like you
opportunity.
have a magic potion that you're cooking, and
Exactly.
you're keeping it
No, like I
confidential.
said, I think ultimately, like, we want to be more of an MVNO, right? Like a virtual operator,
So
a
I'd be
mobile
able to
carrier
make
of
calls
sorts.
from the app,
Call
like just
anything that you do with telecommunications. I mean, imagine if you have like Fonbnk tokens in your wallet. You walk into a room and your internet access works, right? You can access pay TV. You can make calls. You can, you know,
yeah,
uh, buy a cup of coffee, right? Um, I think, what most people, this is a way to look at it. Like, people talk about cryptocurrencies and everything. Well, obviously we use the blockchain, but the largest sort of digital asset class globally that no one sort of thinks about is this sort of prepaid telephony
mm,
credit.
mm,
And we've created a way to sort of monetize that, or tokenize, extract that value and
yeah,
make it interoperable.
yeah. By the way, can you monetize data balances, or is it just airtime?
Oh yeah. No, I mean,
Depends on the.
yeah, it's it's whatever. It's airtime is synonymous for data, text.
Okay, okay, okay. It's both data
Yeah.
and okay, got it. By the way, there's I'm going to star for you a comment here by I am Oscar on the comments side. So I think you were mentioning something about like arbitraging, and he said, especially where country currencies like Zimbabwe, I guess he means, and Argentina are declining against US dollar. This is a great hedge for general public. So are you seeing that the kind of like behavior with your users whereby their currency is so
Yeah.
volatile?
I think that's a much more sophisticated behavior. And we're creating tools to um, to allow people to access that. Um, and that's why a lot of people in those markets use cryptocurrency. Um, but yeah, that's exactly why, right? Like, I mean, ultimately, one of our visions is that, like, I see uh, cryptocurrencies, but specifically not, volatile currencies, but things like stable coins, as uh, a better financial vehicle than a traditional bank account. And if it can be distributed or accessed via a mobile phone, that might be the only financial instrument a person ever really needs, as long as they can, like, you know pay for food, water, shelter with it, right? Like, and that's ultimately where we see an opportunity with Fonbnk, is providing that type of basic level sort of financial infrastructure for people on the planet that have not ordinarily been able to access that.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I tend to like always go down the rabbit hole of product. We can like
Oh, no,
go
no,
back
that's fine.
to like a more macro view here. And Jad, if you have any questions more that are more macro, please. Uh, did you have something?
Sure. So regarding the telcos, because you mentioned a lot of partners more on the financial side, Uh, have you talked to any before? Do they see you as a threat? Do they see an opportunity here? Especially that your longer vision is to be MVNO. So, what's your take on that?
So really what we want to create is a type of middleware that allows telcos to have a global interoperability and accessibility for their users wherever they might be in the world, right? And you think about a lot of the diaspora communities that like they always want their local SIM and they'll save it when they go back and visit. The other thing is, um, uh, I'm from Jamaica, like, and like many people in emerging markets, like we always had parallel currency economies, right? It was always better to, you could always do business in dollars, even though it may not be it's not the official currency of that country. And I'm seeing this phenomena more and more, right? Like I have friends in Ethiopia, and there's delivery apps where you can pay with Venmo, right? Even though it's not officially sanctioned in that country, they're like, oh, well, oh, you're US, you have Venmo, I'll gladly take dollars, just send it to this account because the owner or one of the principals has that account. Same as many Chinese, they're using WeChat across Africa. And telcos, sort of the thing that many don't realize, especially emerging market telcos, they have over the past decade or so, as they've built their businesses, and they're great businesses, but they have huge amounts of like US and European denominated private equity debt, right? That they have to pay in euros or dollars. How are they going to get euros or dollars, right? And ultimately, like there have even been services like a lot of these airtime remittance wholesalers. Really, what they're doing are providing treasury management solutions where diaspora pay in dollars or euros to top up family members' phones locally, and the carrier keeps the funds in the U.S. so they can have sort of dollar-based accounts, right? They're optimizing for those. And I've even had stories like one of our key advisors. He's a telco product manager for one of the leading multinational carriers globally, and he's just like, look, like we have countries where we might have millions of dollars of just stranded cash, right? Can't get it out. So, going back to this whole on ramp, into digital money, I do believe as we get scale, this is where like we can be we can be really a powerful partner to mobile carriers, where if not just for treasury management solutions, where we can dollarize a lot of their customer payments, that could be a tremendous opportunity for them. But ultimately, like not all of them can do it. They're regulated businesses. One example, I read an article about like Safaricom in Kenya. The central bank actually asked them to suspend or delay their dividend payment because, even though they're a very successful company, that once they made this dividend, it would drain the forex reserves from their central bank, and the government couldn't pay off its debts globally. So they had to break it up into multiple pieces in order to do that. But these are just realities, and I don't see these going away. But I run a global small business. I know others that run global small businesses. There's no way that you could go to market across sub-Saharan Africa or all of Latin America or all of Southeast Asia or all of Middle East or all of the world and, accept and manage these very complicated treasury systems. And so that's what we, ultimately that's sort of our value prop for a lot of these carriers and that ecosystem. We're probably not there yet from a scale standpoint, but that's the goal.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. I still have two questions, and then we can move to our traditional question. So first, being in like a startup journey, you go through different funding rounds. Also, of course, you have friends who have their own startups, etc. How do you see investors dealing with Web3 opportunities or with Fonbnk? Do you feel like a sharp difference in behavior or how they see these startups today versus last year, which was kind of a golden age?
Yeah, for the most part, I still don't think most investors truly understand Web3. For that matter, I don't think a lot of people in Web3 fully understand Web3. I'm a specialized sort of professional in like I have this crazy background in wireless telecommunications, spectrum acquisition and networks, as well as payments. And then I got into crypto, and I think about like all the different applications that we might have built along the way in both those different industries where we have these sort of distributed databases and networks and systems and where the blockchain, I can see the clear sort of value prop, for this technology, independent of, the capital markets sort of innovations that have been created, like i.e. Bitcoin or some of these DeFi solutions, which are all good, but I also think that like really what the world, and specifically what I describe as trust, and clearinghouse, and financial services industry in general, is a new type of operating system. And in the same way that the internet was very disruptive and transformational for media and software, I see the blockchain and distributed ledger technology having a same type of impact across these trust clearinghouse type businesses, and especially in emerging markets where these types of institutions may not have ever existed, or if they did, they had no trust, right? You think about it, you're a trust business and there's no trust, right? That's why people keep money under their mattresses, even though it's against their best interest, because they know that it could potentially be seized from them if they don't, or if they put it in an institution like that. And so, but this is where having something built on software that is not mercurial or fiat in terms of how they operate is powerful. And even if you look at sort of what's gone on in the crypto markets over the past 6 months or so, a lot of that's based on human beings, not the software. The core protocols are intact. They're working. They worked as designed, right? And that's what the financial system actually needs. Like, get a lot of these silly bankers out of the way and put in place better software where you can bake in real sort of hedging, and value at risk, and systems and circuit breakers that will alert the world or just stop bad actors, right? And that's fundamentally what's happened in the last few financial crises that we had, whether it's the traditional finance or even crypto. It's just bad actors that are over leveraged, too greedy, and they were able to lie or obfuscate, or through lack of transparency, get some means to an end, but it ultimately had negative consequences on the system. But the technology worked, right? And that's fundamentally, that's the proof in the pudding, and why I think, especially for places like emerging markets, and I'll sort of sum up in the same way, and this is sort of our thesis, but in the same way a lot of these countries leapfrog telephony, going from no phone directly into mobile, you're going to see many of these same citizens, or probably a new generation, go from no fi or no financial services directly into DeFi.
I like how a question about the acceptance of Web3 ended up being a rant on the lack of trust of the traditional finance.
Well, I'm not trying to poke anybody in the eye, but like, it just, if you think about like what's plaguing the world right now, oh, we're in a recession. I mean, obviously there's other issues, but the result of it is like this recession and moving money around and inflation. These are man-made things. I'm a human being. I want to buy something. Don't put artificial, barriers to prevent me to do that. It's my money, and I work hard for it.
Very clear. And last question regarding, have you tried to be regulated? Any hurdle you faced on that front?
So we're a U.S. company, and there is a bit of sort of regulatory asymmetry that exists because of that. But we're regulated under FinCEN. We have, and what we've really designed, right, is this meta ledger. So think about this like abacus, this virtual abacus, right? And we work with partners that are regulated in local jurisdictions to actually move money into the system and out of the system. And in many cases, we don't even custody any of those funds. And as such, and this is sort of my view on sort of what regulation should look like in a sort of a regulated crypto world, but it's really about the on and off ramps, right? Everything in between, it's just ones and zeros, and and in many respects, think about it as like going over the ocean, right? But once it gets to your local jurisdiction, or once you want to add it from your jurisdiction, I do think there's all types of requirements for transparency, for trust, security, et cetera, that only regulation can instill.
Great.
So we're running close to the hour of our discussion. I think, especially with me, if looking at the product, I can speak another couple of hours with you, but we can do that offline. Usually, I don't know if when you and Jad discussed before preparing for this discussion, whether he mentioned to you the last question we would like to ask. But there is a last question we like to ask, and I will ask it to you. Take your time to think about it. And it's usually if you have any hero, idol of yours, or heroine of yours that is someone you, historic or not, that you hold to high regards. Take a minute, even if we're live. It's okay.
That's a great question, and it's a great question. In many respects, like I think about like who is it? I'm actually a ferocious reader of like biographies, or at least when I was much younger, I sort of saw that as part of my education.
Nice.
I think about like
say your wife also.
Huh? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I was saying you can say your wife is your hero. I was saying you can say your wife is your hero.
No, it's a great question. If we're gonna go that route, like, to be honest, I'll follow up with this a more succinct and straightforward answer. But I look at my dad as my hero, really, fundamentally. He's an immigrant. He came from Jamaica. It's one of those Horatio Alger stories where he sold pamphlets of things at newspapers to pay for his schooling in Jamaica, and he earned enough money once he graduated from high school to get to the States, to go to college, and he got a degree in engineering. And he said, like, his first night in New York, he didn't know anybody, couldn't get, we don't have cell phones, he couldn't get in contact. So he literally, and all he had was $20 in his pockets, and he had to spend the night on a park bench. And he went on to become an executive at Exxon, and then went on to get his PhD and became a tenured professor. And so, but he instilled within me, like, this ethic of value of education and hard work, but always be true to yourself, where you come from. And I remember when we go back to when we went back to Jamaica, like, we grew up in very sort of humble. He came from very humble origins, and he's like, this is your family, son. And I think with Fonbnk or many of my other businesses, it's really around like, and this is what I learned from that, was this: how do we end that cycle? And a lot of it's like people don't know, and and I describe it as like an information asymmetry, right? How do we level the playing field? And that's been a real driver, whether it's in education or telecommunications and fintech. How do we make opportunity more accessible to more people on this planet, right? And I think none of us would be here today if it weren't for that belief.
Entrepreneurs, the go-getter attitude runs in the blood, apparently.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Chris. We really enjoyed the talk. Thanks you for all your story, and looking forward to host you another time.
Hey, my pleasure, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
And I will say, like, I'm happy to chat offline with any of the viewers if they want to reach out to me. I'm on Twitter at C Duffus, DUFFUS, or reach out on LinkedIn.
I could update the description of this YouTube video with your contact info, since it's
excellent.
As long as it's not spamming you, I could.
Yes, as long as it's not, please.
Okay.
No spam.
Yeah. Sounds good. Great.
Well, thank you.
Everyone.
Have a fantastic day.
You too.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.